What's up, gang? Today we are going to go over 5 safe picks for Mythic Plus after the new patch dropped 11.0.5 because there have been some hefty changes. So the first class that we're going to be starting with is the Mage. Now I'm going to sort of group these together, but I'm mainly talking about Frost and Arcane here as they are for some reason getting buffs. So the reason that I wanted to group these together is because I feel like in the top keys, the Mages are going to be able to switch between the specs. So you've got your Arcane for your insane prio damage and your great boss damage as well. They are just able to delete those scary mobs and scary bosses at the same time as doing some incredible cleave damage. And then you have the Frost Mage, which has the overall damage. This is where you're going to be doing your great single target, your great cleave, and your great AoE, mass AoE, all at the same time and do more overall damage, but overall damage doesn't always necessarily mean the best thing, because I do think that Arcane is better in some keys, like your Dawnbreakers, your Mists of Turner Scythe is definitely better, I would say at least. And then you've got your Frost Mage for dungeons like Arakara that are more mass AoE focused. So the damage alone, because they're getting a buff, they were already a safe pick, and now they're getting a buff, so they're now even safer of a pick. But it's not just all about damage, right? In Mythic Plus, you need that utility and you need those defensives, and the Mage just brings all of that. You have 2 AoE stops as a Mage. You've got your Supernova or Dragon's Breath, depending on which one you're talented into. I don't actually know, but isn't Supernova, when you're talented into Sun Fury, it becomes Gravity Lapse, and now isn't that being changed into a stun? I hope that's not true, and that's coming from a Mage main for Season 1. And then you've also got your Blast Wave as well as another AoE stop for the Mage. You've got a shorter range kick cooldown as well compared to most other ranged on a 20-second cooldown. You can also rush it back with Shifting Power, but you're not likely to use that just for your kick. And then in terms of other utility as well, you've got your Frost Mage, which does actually, I mean, I've experienced it myself this season. It actually allows and opens up pools for your tank that they maybe possibly couldn't do without a Frost Mage because of the constant snares on the mobs. So for example, in City of Threads, you've got that conscript pool where the tanks just get obliterated. My tank literally can just pull 3 packs at once now and just kite out because I'm just slowing everything by, what, like 70%-ish? I don't actually know what the number is. Other utility, obviously, cannot go without mentioning Arcane Intellect. Huge buff to your group, especially your healer, which helps with the healing throughput so your group can live longer. And then they also bring the Mass Barrier, which are, although it's been nerfed now to a 3-minute cooldown, I feel like this season there is just so much unavoidable AoE damage that the values become even stronger from the Mass Barrier. So that will help your group live maybe mechanics that you otherwise couldn't. And then the Mage itself anyway, I think they have like 6 defensives: Alter Time, Mirror Image, Mass Barrier, Barrier, Ice Block, Double Ice Block for Frost Mage, and Invis. Did I mention that? I'm not sure. But they have 6 defensives, 7 if you count the double ice blocks for Frost Mage. And then the last thing that I do want to touch on for Mage, although it's not really that relevant this season because you're always playing with a Restoration Shaman, is they do also bring Lust. You're going to need it in Mythic Plus, but it is likely already covered by the Restoration Shaman. So that's my first safe pick. Shock Horror. Mage is a safe pick for Mythic Plus once again. Now, we'll move on to a spec that's not ever really been a safe pick, I don't think, and it is the Frost Death Knight. Now, the Frost Death Knight might, as it stands right now, be the highest DPS in the game in Mythic Plus. There's a few specs that might come close, but the amount of damage the Frost DK puts out in the mass AoE, it's got great priority damage as well, and even good single target too. It's ridiculous. They are getting a slight AoE nerf through their Glacial Advance, so they're going to lose a tiny bit of AoE from that, but I'm not even really sure that that's how they do a lot of their AoE. I think that's just going to be like a whatever change. So that's their damage covered. As a Death Knight, they are basically unkillable. They have multiple passive defensives through their Will of the Necropolis and also Null Magic, is it? Where they basically just take a lot less magic damage. And then they have many active defensives. They've got Lichborn, they've got AMS on a short cooldown, they've got Icebound Fortitude, and they also bring Anti-Magic Zone for the group as well. So again, like the Mage's Mass Barrier, really nice for that unavoidable AoE damage. And then, although their utility is not something that's necessarily sought after, Death Grips and Abomination Limbs as well they're really niche, but in the scenarios that they are useful, they're like insanely useful. So think Amarth in Necrotic Wake. You're just pulling in those mages for free. send an A-bomb limb on one, send your death grips on the next one, and it just makes those mechanics so much more trivial. All of those mobs get cleaved down, and you don't even really have to think about them. They also bring an AoE stop in Blinding Sleet. They've got a mid-range kick in their Mind Freeze as well. So they basically just bring the whole package. My third safe pick for Mythic Plus in 11.0.5 is the Assassination Rogue. Now, Asa, from what I've seen, can potentially be, again, alongside the Frost Death Knight, some of the highest damage overall in Mythic Plus right now. I have seen, I know it's Kush is built different, but I have seen some disgusting numbers come out of that man. And they are also getting about a 6%-ish buff to their single target. They definitely aren't as strong on pure single target, but what they do have, which is kind of like contradictory a little bit, is insane priority damage at the same time as doing crazy high AoE damage. They're going to be funneling all of their main damage into their priority target, deleting the scary mob or whatever that is, and then just passively doing crazy high AoE damage with their Caustic Spatter mainly, and also their Crimson Tempest, which they have to apply once in a while. I don't know how many seconds it actually is. Then they also actually do a lot of damage through their garrotes when they vanish or come out of stealth and open and garrote multiple different mobs, which the damage is nice alone, but that is also locking down mobs with the silence that is added from the Iron Wire. That is getting a slight nerf, but regardless, the value that Assassination got with this silence coming into Dragonflight with the War Within, with the changes to stops, because stops now no longer put the mobs like unique abilities on cooldown. They'll just instantly recast like a mass tremor. That makes kicks so much more valuable. So having access to multiple silences throughout packs as well when they vanish during a pack, and being able to reopen with those garrotes, silence everything, silence multiple mobs at once, and just lock those mobs down is like literally invaluable. And on top of that, it's a rogue, so they have their two stuns in Kidney Shot and Cheap Shot. They have an AoE stop in Blind as well. They have Sap to be able to skip mobs, as well as Shroud of Concealment to skip even more mobs, and Path for optimal routing or maybe optimal lusts. Rogues are notoriously tanky as well. I wouldn't say they are like one of the tankiest specs anymore. They definitely used to be. But that being said, they've got their Cloak of Shadows, they've got their Vanish, they've got their 2 charges of Feint, which now is no longer on the global cooldown. So they're still going to have to pull the energy for it, but they're not going to get killed by missing a global to feint. They can get that extra damage in and then just feint at the last second. So that's sort of going to make them a bit tankier. And as far as I'm aware, Asa is still going to be playing Deathstalker. So they're just much more tanky because of that. Because when they press Evasion, they take lesser magic damage. And when they press Cloak of Shadows, they take less physical damage. So again, like the other 2 specs that I've already mentioned, they just cover all bases. They've got crazy good damage. They're unkillable pretty much, and they bring amazing utility to the group as well. Now, another wild card, but I don't think this will come as a surprise. There's a fly. I don't think this will come as a surprise to anybody, because Ellie Shaman is looking nuts going into the next patch. I don't know if you guys have seen, but Elemental is already one of the better ranged. I feel like people haven't really clocked on because not as many people play Elemental as it is, and probably a lot of Shamans will just be playing Resto instead, maybe? I don't know. But Elemental Shaman is getting some crazy, I'm saying crazy a lot, aren't I? They're getting some mental AoE buffs. Elemental Shaman is probably going to put out some of the highest DPS in Mythic Plus right now. If not, it will be the highest DPS in Mythic Plus after these changes. They're getting a huge change to their Mastery, which now increases their pets damage, basically their Elementals damage, which they're pretty much permanently having out at the moment. So now Mastery is the Elemental's best stat. They bring a great group buff as well in Sky Fury, bringing extra Mastery to classes that there's a lot of classes that like Mastery this season, as well as the increased auto attacks, which is nice for your prot warriors, generating that extra rage that they can spend on whatever they want. Nice for Assassination Rogues as well, and also nice for your Frost DKs. So I feel like Elemental might slot into that perfectly. I don't know exactly what the meta is going to be, but Ellie Shaman will definitely be bringing a lot of value because of the Sky Fury buff. Other utility they bring is Ancestral Guidance, huge off healing when your healer needs it, especially with the amount of damage that the Elemental Shaman is going to be pumping out. It's going to be converted to healing, and your healer's basically going to be able to go AFK. They also bring 2 AoE stops. They got the Cap Totem, which can also just replace itself after it's done it, so you're getting 2 stuns out of that. And you've also got your Thundershock Knock-Up, which doesn't DR with as much as the Cap Totem probably would. So that's 2 nice AoE stops there. They've got the shortest kick in the game in Wind Shear. They are getting a slight nerf to their Poison Cleanse totem, which is now going from a 45-second cooldown to a 2-minute cooldown. And when I say slight nerf, it's actually a pretty huge nerf because Poison Cleansing Totem is so insane this season. Like, the value you get out of that totem, like, you just have to bring chamois to some keys, but you're probably going to bring one anyway in the Resto chamois, aren't you? So actually that also ties into the Sky Fury buff as well. So maybe the value isn't as high as I first thought because you are going to have probably a Resto chamois locked in, right? Ellie chamois are tankier now that they've got their Stone Bulwark totem and some other passive DRs in the tree, but they are definitely still not a tanky class and they will need to be babied if possible. But it's a lot better than it used to be. So I would definitely say that Elemental chamois is a safe pick. Even if they get nerfed, which we're probably like half expecting them to because some of the numbers I've seen is absolutely wild. But I still think, like the Frost DK, even after nerfs, they will still be in a good spot. And then the final safe pick for 11.0.5, I think has to be Augmentation Evoker. I know, I hate to say it as much as you hate to hear it. Orc's not really getting any changes. They're getting a change to Unravel, which will probably make Unravel one of their best single target presses if the boss has a shield. So think Nalthor the Rhinebinder in Necrotic Wake. You're going to be pressing Unravel and getting some more DPS out of that. But Orc's just already strong. It's in 90+% of the highest time keys at the moment, and that's probably not even being generous to them. It's probably 95% plus. I don't even know at this point. But they are just unbelievable right now. And that is because they are doing cracked damage themselves. Before, like in Dragonflight, they weren't doing crazy damage themselves. The reason you would bring an Orc to a key is for survivability. If you needed to time a key through survivability and living mechanics, then you could bring an Orc. If you needed to time the key in a fast pace with as much DPS as you could possibly gain, then you would probably bench the Orc as long as you didn't need the survivability. But that is no longer the case because Orgs are now doing nuts damage themselves as well as buffing up the rest of the group's damage. If you actually take a look at Warcraft logs from the keys, like Orgs are sometimes beating other DPS in the keys depending on how the key goes, etc. Obviously there's a lot of variables there, but they are keeping up on damage is what I'm trying to say. Like your Frost DKs and Acid Rogues are going to out DPS them, but they will be a lot closer than they used to be. And Orgs were meta since they were introduced in Dragonflight without that extra damage. So the hero talents have really buffed them up there. So on top of that, they're also buffing the rest of your group's damage, and they're also buffing the survivability of the rest of your group. Tanks can really feel when there's an Org in a group, especially this season. I feel like there is a lot of scary dungeons like Grim Batol, for example. So many tank busters in there, so many tank buster mobs that buff up the whole packs and just delete tanks. So tanks can feel that difference when they have an Org present in their group. The amount of stops that Orgs brings almost feels like it's needed sometimes as well. I don't know if Org is actually cemented as a meta pick right now. It might be, but it's going to sound contradictory to what I said about Assassination earlier with regards to silences and kicks being more useful than ever because of the changes to stops. But when you start getting into these higher keys and you have to do massive pulls, you simply do not have the amount of kicks you need to keep kicking the mobs that are just going to one-shot with their abilities like Earthbolt now that maybe you could ignore before. So you do need to just kind of chain these stops over and over, and the Org really fills that niche nicely. And then even if some of these casts do start going through on, say, your elemental shamans that are a lot squishier, the Org can start to then rescue or maybe even use a Zephyr if an AoE goes off. So they bring even more survivability to your group through that. And then finally, their survivability themselves, they're pretty tanky as well. They've got 2 charges of your Obsidian Scales, which is a huge damage reduction. They've got their Renewing Blaze for any hard-hitting rot damage, and then they also boast a cheap death. So, those are my 5 safe picks for Mythic Plus for patch 11.0.5. I didn't manage to get around to doing one for the release of The War Within, unfortunately, so I thought I'd make one right now. If you guys do agree with my choices, then feel free to like the video, and if you didn't, then let me know down in the comments below what you would pick. Maybe I would include an enhancement shaman in there if I was going to do 6 safe picks, but we only did 5 for today. Subscribe to your boy if you're new, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.